Looks like we have a couple of minutes and more people are going to join. So again, we'll get started in just a second. For those of you just joining, we'll get started in just a second.
We have another session beginning, and Chad is going to be presenting, so make sure you're on your computer. Thank you.
All right, we'll get started here in just a second. Still have people joining. Okay, I guess we'll just get started here, and I'll try to admit the people if they're if we have some latecomers.
Do you want to make me host? Or no, you have to share,
yeah.
right? I was gonna say I can monitor that if you want, but
yeah. Okay. I can keep an eye on it. I won't need to share my screen for a bit. So welcome to hybrid online and in-person teaching. I kind of thought a lot about how to put this session together in a meaningful way for you guys, and kind of give you some history and some background, addressing tech, addressing a lot of the issues that we face in trying to teach online, and not only teaching online, teaching in an online hybrid and face-to-face environment where we may be asked to simulcast or stream our live classroom to the web. I guess that leads me to some of the introductory information and some background on myself. I've been teaching online since about 2003. I was just a college kid. I just got my bachelor's in teaching, and there weren't many jobs in Michigan. I had an interest in web development, programming, and software design, so I started pursuing that, and that led me to find a system called Moodle. Back then, there was Moodle, Blackboard, WebCT, and that was it for your learning management systems. There were a couple of off-brands, but there was no Google Classroom. There wasn't any Edmodo. None of that existed yet. And I thought it was really interesting, the idea of being able to teach online with students. And so I pursued Moodle because it was free. Brandon High School's where my wife had worked, and I set them up with a Moodle server and got them going, and they used it much like you guys use Google Classroom today. Mind you, this was 20 years ago, and the teachers loved it. I ran that server for I think almost 10, 15 years before the district moved on to a different platform. When I started, teaching online in 2006, I took a job as an instructional designer after I got my degree in instructional design and development from U of M. And we actually did our first simulcast in 2006 to over 30,000 medical and nursing students. So we had a face-to-face setting where students were were going through an orientation, and we wanted to broadcast that face-to-face session to all of our online students all over the world, so that they could also partake in the orientation for the nursing program and diagnostic medical sonography and every medical program. And our IT department was a little bit difficult to work with, and we actually ended up running that online session on a cell phone connection, and it went very well. In 2014, a little bit later, I worked for the Department of Defense, and then it was an instrumented underwater training program for special operations, GIADF, and what we were tasked with there was basically delivering online instruction to all of the military, port security, and law enforcement personnel on the recovery and remote sensing and detection of underwater entities. So finding dead bodies, protecting port security, diver intrusion, all of that. Later in around 2016, me and Mrs. Parmentier, along with the University of Michigan, did a simulcast underwater where we broadcast the keynote address from about 30 feet deep. And we were told by many experts in technology that that was simply impossible. It went well. The video is still on YouTube today. And so that's kind of a background into how I got into education technology, teaching online. And over the past 20 years, I think I've learned a lot, and I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot change from the public school arena up in through the college arena. And that brings me to some of the challenges and what we face in online teaching. Let me see check the messages to see if there's any questions. It doesn't look like there is, so that's good. And I think Mrs. Parmentier might be manning the message board. So challenges to teaching online. There's a lot, and I'll get to the technology and the classroom setup and best practices. I'll even give a tour of what I'm doing to teach online. And sorry, I got a strange meeting request, but that's okay. So the most important thing when we're teaching online, especially in public education, but this does apply to college instruction as well, is balance. You have to achieve balance. Teaching online is more difficult and more work than teaching face-to-face. When you teach online, you'll run into issues with technology and with the learning management system you're using. And the idea is to let instruction and the standards of the course drive the technology that you're using, not the other way around. All too often, educators will find technologies and they'll have a PD on it, and it may not be effective for their subject in their class, but they're pushed to use it. I encourage people to use technology that's effective for their subject area in their specific class. And keeping your standards in mind and what you want students to know and be able to do is critical. And you also have to keep in mind balance. What I mean about balance is some teachers like to grade a lot, and they'll use content from the book, and those students will read a chapter, and then they'll do questions, and then the teacher will give them warm-ups and worksheets and activities, and there'll be a significant amount of grading. And so the balance there is they have the content from a textbook manufacturer, and they're delivering that content as the instruction, and they have a lot of work to do to keep up with grading. Myself, I'm a little bit different. I like to create my own content, so I put a lot of my time and effort into creating engaging content, meaningful instruction for students, and so I wouldn't have time to grade every little thing that students have. So instead, I try to grade what I feel is authentic to the students, what's critical to helping me determine what they have learned and are able to do. And I try to cut that down. I also cut it down by trying to automate quizzes and assessments as much as possible. I want quizzes, multiple choice, and true and false to grade themselves. And I want them to be able to be deployed quickly. I don't want to sit there typing in 100 questions for a couple chapters of a novel. That's too time consuming. So balance is really important when teaching online. The second thing that's really important when you're teaching online is effective technology. When I used to do simulcasting 20 years ago, the way that I would do that is, if you remember the cell phone Bluetooth devices that you would use so you didn't have to have your phone at your face, like the jabbers and all those. I used one of those because they're Bluetooth, and I would sync that to my computer so I could walk freely around the room while I was working with my students and streaming online. That technology was not intended for video conferencing, but it worked well. So it's about finding what technologies are effective for your style of teaching. And again, goals and standards need to drive the instruction, not the tech. That's what should be, the driving force. When you're in teaching online, the ALM model that we had PD on earlier this summer talked about gradual release model. And the gradual release model is something that I've worked with. When I was doing the instructional design for the Department of Defense, they follow a military TRADOC, and that's almost the same thing as gradual release. Gradual release means I do, you watch, we do, I help, then you do it on your own for assessment. TRADOC is task, standard, practice, execution. It's the same thing. So your commander will, or your instructor in the military will give a demonstration, then you'll have practice, then you'll have assessment. And it's a great way to teach. It's the way we've been teaching for 20, 30 years. Let me see if there's any messages or questions. It looks good. Okay. Let me see here. The physical classroom. Back when I was teaching at Brandon High School, where my wife also taught, they asked me to take over for a Microsoft Office class. And the teacher there was using the SAM software, which was basically a simulation of Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And I found that software to be very frustrating and limiting for students. And the students were frustrated with it because back then, they would try to click like the file menu, and if you didn't click it just right, it didn't cause the simulation to bring up the actual window. So I ended up throwing out the software, and I actually had the students use Microsoft Word, gave them specific assignments. But I wanted to record the session and also maybe stream it online. So I began recording my screen and my headset, and I had a few football team members get suspended. Kind of a funny story. They were suspended for, I don't know, wearing their hats, something silly, being disrespectful. No, it wasn't anything really big. And so I thought, well, that's great. You're getting 3 days off. Guess what? You're not going to get on my classwork. So I told them to log in to Moodle, because we use that at the school, and that I would broadcast the class live for them so that they could participate in their, creating their, I think we're doing online flyers or something in Microsoft Word. And they did that. And believe it or not, I actually was asked by the administration to not do that, because when they were suspended, part of the punishment was they had to make up their work after the fact. But no one really realized that I, was able to deliver the instruction to their homes, much like what we have to do now. And when you get into doing that and you're teaching in that environment, it becomes taxing on the instructor, because you not only have to deal with your face-to-face class, you have to remember that you have online students watching. So I would have a student watch the message board, much like we're doing here today. And if anything came up while I was streaming, the student would say, hey, there's a question from a student online or whatnot. And we also did that when we simulcasted through the college. So allocating students as helpers in the online environment is not a bad idea. Choosing effective technology is critically important. And that kind of leads me to the physical classroom setup. Now, hopefully I will not lose my audio here, because I'm going to unplug my microphone, which I'll actually talk about for a second. And I'll kind of give you guys a tour and show you how I set up my classroom. When we talk about the technology, I've got a snowball microphone here. This is it's a condenser microphone, so it's like what radio hosts use. It should make your voice sound good and clear and loud. You can get these on eBay for like 20 bucks. They used to be like 150, but you know, they've come down a lot. These are a great tool because you just let it set on your desk and it's going to capture your mic. The only problem is you're tethered to the desk. But I'm using Zoom, and if I unplug, I'm unplugging now, automatically go to the default microphone. Can everybody hear me? Type yes in the message box if you can. Let's see here. Okay, good. So now I'm mobile. So going to the classroom setup. As you well know, sorry, I didn't be on camera here. Switch classrooms. I switched to the room 1 from room 5. And I was a little bit disheartened that the internal sound system was not in this room like my old room. So if you do have that internal sound system, you can actually use that for your sound for your online students. So as far as classroom setup, I like to set my classroom up where I have my teacher desk. Hope I can kind of see what I'm doing here. Teacher's desk at the back of the room. This is behind where the students are going to be facing. And I want my students in the classroom with all the desks to face the whiteboard. And this serves a couple of different purposes. It allows me to see the whiteboard as I'm instructing. It allows me to see the students from behind and they can't see me. So they're not constantly watching to see if I'm turning my eyes or head away so that they can, you know, pick on the guy or the girl next to them. And it also lets me see every one of their screens if we are on Chromebooks. Since we don't have monitoring software, as far as I know of, that's going to be very useful because if I see them pop up on a gaming site, I can immediately say, hey, close your Chromebook. And then they have to restart and get back on, and you know, usually it's a deterrent. With the sound, you want to have sound not just at the back of the classroom, but also where students at the front of the classroom can hear if there happens to be a question from an online student. Now, I know that we might be teaching our classes in a you know, an hour without face-to-face students, but if you miss that or have issues, you may find yourself having to teach with students in class. And if you have an online student have a question, you're going to want those students to be able to hear and not have to repeat. So setting up sound, the classroom, how you like, is very important for teaching online. Microphones, usually if you have the microphone on the computer that's near you, that's going to work well. I like to use, you can get the actual wireless microphones. I bought one last year when I was here. I think it was like, I don't know, $15, $20. It worked okay. But I'd probably go back to one of those Bluetooth, you know, jabber things like you see the stock market people wearing, just because they're, you know, good. There's a question in the chat about games not being blocked. Honestly, from what I understand after talking with tech, the KDE, the Kentucky Department of Education, actually runs the filtering system statewide. So unfortunately, a lot of gaming sites are not blocked. And some gaming sites are actually educational, like I think Brain Pop and a couple others. But you may not want students on those sites when you're delivering instruction or in a unit or a novel or something like that. So you want to try to curtail that. Unfortunately, if we did have GoGuardian or you know, Synchronize or one of these other monitoring systems, you could actually control the Chromebooks to where they could only go to the site that you're talking about. So if you're going to go to pbs.com, you can say pbs.com is the only site that, you know, Chromebooks can go to. Those types of software systems are, you know, invaluable in the classroom. They're critically useful. It gives you control. As you saw last year in the wired labs with Bion, that monitoring software was a big hit. It really stopped students from messing around on gaming sites. It's very good. It goes back to what are the effective tools that we need to teach, you know, with regards to technology. What makes our jobs easier? What streamlines the process? And so you have to keep that in mind. So let me see. I've talked about the physical setup of the classroom, microphones, sound, multiple cameras. Oh, multiple cameras I didn't talk about. So it's my understanding we're going to want to try to limit the exposure of the face-to-face students if we're having to simulcast classes. So you may be in a situation where we're getting the cameras that they showed in the PD that stand up, the document cams or cameras. So you might find yourself in a situation where you want to have multiple cameras. Now, I don't know if Google Meet supports the use of multiple cameras, but Zoom does. I can have my camera facing me right now, and I could have a camera facing my blackboard over there. So if I get up out of my desk to go to the blackboard to work on writing or an outline for writing, I can switch to camera 2, and it's going to miss the majority of the students based on where I place that camera. Then I don't have to monkey with trying to, point this camera to where I'm going to be. I have kind of 2 cameras ready to go, and you just would simply switch in your settings in Zoom. As far as, I guess I'll say something about Google Meet. I foresee, with my experience in streaming every day while we were out for COVID, if students are required to be on there, you're probably going to run into students wanting to play music. They may want to point their video at an inappropriate meme, something like that. So it is absolutely critical, in my opinion, that you have control over the cameras and microphones. Any person in this session right now, I can stop their microphone, I can stop their video, and if they're an issue, I can put them back into the waiting room, or I can actually boot them altogether and they're out of the session. Those type of tools are critical for teaching because we do have behavior problems. We do have students that act out. If they act out in the face-to-face classroom, they are going to act out in the online classroom. It's a fact of life. I did suggest that there are some things you can do within the Google admin environment where you can create what are the Google Education Suite set up in organizational units. So just like Active Directory and regular school networks, when you log on your computer, you're part of a group. You can create a group for Google Chromebooks that basically locks everything down. They can get on the Chromebook, but you can disable the microphone, you can disable the camera, and you can put them into that group for a week, let's say, for any behavior issues. And I know that our IT department's aware of that and may be able to offer that if we run into those problems. Hopefully we won't run into any problems and students will be intrinsically motivated to partake in our online instruction and do all of our work, hopefully. So that covers pretty much all the physical aspects. If there's not any questions, I wanted to actually share my screen and show how I set up my Google Classroom environment, because you have your physical environment, but you also have your online environment. And when you're teaching online, it's critical to make, to keep your content as organized as possible, easy to find, and use technology that is going to mimic the face-to-face classroom. So if there's no questions, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So give me a second here, share screen. And there we go. Okay, so hopefully my screen's gonna share here. Okay, here it is. So I'm gonna show both my Google Classroom and my Moodle Classroom. So in Google Classroom, I have my stream, and right now on my stream I don't have that much, but I do have one saved announcement. And I guess I'll talk about that first because you may be wondering, well, what's that for? I could not figure out a way to do discussions easily. And when you're teaching online, part of that gradual release model is you want to be able to show students what you're doing and have them demonstrate, and also have a collaborative element where they discuss things. So if you're teaching online and you're in a Google Meet or Zoom meeting and students are discussing, that's great, but it's kind of asking students to think real quick, on the tip of their toes, and give answers right now. Discussion boards allow students to process information and post a little bit more methodically. They can think about it, they can support their answers. And so discussion boards have always been critical to online teaching. So in order to do a discussion board, what I figured I would try is to put it in as a stream. And the stream here is where I put the question. Why do you think it's important to have, I can't even remember what I wrote for the question. Why do you think it's important to have procedures in the class related to COVID-19? So I'm gonna be talking about my, procedures the first day of class. And so hopefully they can respond to that and I can find it. I'm not sure how the grading and tracking and participation is gonna be with that. I don't see where there's a way to process that. But that's what that is. That's for the discussion board. And that's the only part that's not in my actual classwork. So if I go over to my classwork in Google Classroom, they mentioned in the PD that it's important to kind of use topics to show where you're at. And that's going to be critical for students, because the way Google Classroom is set up, you can see that this is just my first week of class. So I've got, first week is August 25th to 28th. We start on a Tuesday. I want my students to see the course orientation video. Then I want them to go over the classroom procedures and expectations. I would have a Google Meet where I also go over this live. And then there's a video for students that missed the live class session. And then I put in a quiz because I want to know that they were listening and paying attention to the class expectations. This is a formative assessment. It's meant to be real quick. It's 5 questions. I just want them to I want to be able to know that they were paying attention. And then it goes on to Wednesday, where we're going to start probably the story Raymond's Run by Tony K. Bambara, sorry. And that's a PDF file. And so we're going to just go through and read that. Students that have difficulties reading have the access to audio. I know a few teachers here were asking about audio in Google Classroom. It was really easy. I pulled the audio off another teacher's website, her personal website on the internet. You have to search for the MP3 file type. If you find that, you can put that in as a resource and it will play automatically and it plays fine. And since it's Google, we don't have to worry about bandwidth, which is actually nice. So that's our Wednesday. It's just getting through the story. That may bleed into Thursday a little bit. Then Thursday, what I would normally do with my face-to-face students is actually annotate and do a close reading of the story. And that's where I want to work and interact with students, where they're reading, ask questions, point important things out. They need to highlight, they need to take notes, they need to make notes to themselves that mean something to them. And the best I can do with this is probably conduct that using Google Meet or Zoom. And so that's my first week of instruction. So as you can see, that's just 1 week, and that's pretty light. There's not a lot going on there. And if you times that by 180 days, you can imagine how long this is going to get. So organization is going to be key. The other thing in Google Classroom is it's not a learning management system. A learning management system is SCORM compliant, ADA compliant, has built-in internal elements for quiz support, quiz deployment. Google Classroom is basically a Google Drive management system, which it's important to know. I had teachers when I was the administrator that would go into the Google Drives and see Google Classroom and go, oh, I don't need that anymore. I don't need that anymore. That is directly linked to these Google Classroom sites. So if you move anything around or try to organize your Google Classroom folder in Google Drive, you may break all of the links within your Google Classroom. So you want to be kind of mindful of that. I leave my Google Classroom folder in Google Drive alone, because Google Classroom is basically handling all that. So that's how I set up my Google Classroom. I did not have the time to actually put the quizzes in. It would have taken me, I think I have 30 questions in for my quizzes for the expectations and for the story. It was just too time consuming to put it in the Google Classroom. So that is how I would set up Google Classroom. And another note, if you're more of an advanced user with Google Classroom and you're finding that there are limits to your instruction or how you want to deliver instruction, there are some ways that you can add interactive online elements that you would create from an instructional standpoint. It's a little bit complicated, but there are software systems out there like Captivate, Lectora, Zerte, and what they do is they basically allow you to create an interactive PowerPoint-like styles. We call them computer-based training modules, where the students would basically click through. You would have to have this hosted outside and whatnot, but if you're advanced and you want to really take Google Classroom to the next level, you could, in theory, marry Google Classroom to some of these e-learning authorware systems and modules. They're time consuming, but the beauty is once you create one, you can use it over and over and over again. So there are ways to get around some of the limitations to Google Classroom if you're willing to go down that road, and if you're willing to put in the time and you're already kind of an advanced user. If you're just getting started with it, use it as is. Follow what the ladies have suggested that have given PD on Google Classroom, and hit the ground running with that. I'm going to give you guys a quick little, and I'll show you the same exact class now in Moodle. This is what I prefer to use because I've used it in the Keys, teaching high school, in Michigan, and of course at the college. Union uses it, and we'll jump over. This is the same class. Uh-oh, someone wants to join and I'm not in that screen. Give me 1 second. That's the only thing bad about these systems. It's difficult to let them in. So I'm going to stop the share for a second and let this person in, and we're going to go back to the share. Sorry about that. Okay, so
when you get a second, can you show them how to transfer stuff from one Google Classroom to the next? That might be helpful too, that we found last night.
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks.
I'll do that right after the Moodle part. Remind me. Okay. So yeah, and that's I confirmed that today. I'll talk about that in a minute. So the same class, sorry, my voice gets scratchy. The same class in Moodle is kind of similar. I put the banner up so the kids know what class they're in. Now this next part, I find it extremely important to be able to have a place if you have content that students are going to use for weeks or months on end, I want to have that readily available. So students are constantly needing help. This is where I'm going to put all my help tutorials. I'm going to have announcements that are going to change daily instruction. So that's going to be something they're going to be visiting every day. We have online sessions every day. So Zoom, they click any of these links, they're right there. They're quick and easy. The first novel I'm probably going to do with the class is The Giver, and it's right there ready to go for the kids. They don't have to hunt for it. It's easy for them to find. And I should have that open in browser, but whatever. And then I'm looking at maybe doing code talkers for my second novel. So I like to have things like that the students are going to continually have to use and go to, readily available. I iconify them so that the students can find them easily. Now with the organization of my system, in my class, that is key, very important to me. I've been in classes that are, you know, like a scavenger hunt, and I hate it personally as a student. So I try to avoid that at all costs. So each one of these are my topic sections in Moodle, and you can open all of them with one click, or you can close all of them, and when you can look at one. This is my same week one in Moodle. I have a section where it shows the students, because they're constantly asking, well, what exactly do I have to do? So I have all assignments that are due for that week by Friday in a topic area right here. Then it goes to Tuesday. I have my course orientation video, my procedures and expectations for the classroom, my classroom procedures video. And then this is where it goes back to that gradual release. I go over what my expectations are with them, and then I have a discussion. We discuss what their concerns are, what they think. So I have a question: what do you think is important, or why do you think it's important to have procedures in the classroom relating to COVID-19? Do you have any questions about the classroom procedures? So that's an opportunity for students to talk, share, maybe even offer ideas that I will actually incorporate into my classroom procedures. If they're being on the up and up, I have no issue with that. And then I have a short quiz where they go in and they'll take a quick quiz. Now, when it comes to assessment online, I know we have students with accommodations, and this probably doesn't apply to them as much, but it's good practice to, if you can, to put a time limit on it. I don't know if you can do that in Google Forms, but this quiz here is a 5-question quiz that is ridiculously easy. If they can't figure out the answers, I certainly don't want them looking up, so they have 10 minutes. And so they have to answer these questions. Pretty straightforward. The questions need to be, I like to be able to, shuffle them, change them around. So if two students are sitting next to each other, they can't look on each other's screens. Just a lot of things that kind of limit the issues with assessment. Now with students who do have accommodations, you need to be able to give them more time or take the time off. Also, I need to be able to offer audio clips of me reading the question, so that if they aren't understanding the question, they're not going to get it right. But if you can read it to them, that's a huge bonus. So going back to that week, that's Tuesday. I then start my short story unit on Wednesday with Raymond's Run, and then I have audio. So just like Google Classroom, it plays the audio and students have access to the digital copy of the story, which I just grabbed from, you know, another website because I didn't want to write it myself. And well, it just opened in a tab, but you guys don't really need to see that. So going back to that week, this is something that becomes critical going back to that gradual release model. So on Wednesday, what I would actually do in the classroom is I would be going through, like I mentioned, or I'm sorry, on Thursday, I would be doing the close reading. So with the close reading, some learning management systems have all, you know, different bells and whistles. One of the things that I like is the PDF annotate. So when the students open this up, I'll go through them on Zoom, we'll annotate together, and then I will say, I help. That's part of the I do, you watch, we do, I help. This is the you do part where they go in and they can actually highlight the text. I think it's a lot like Cami, but the difference is they can collaborate on it. They can actually ask questions and respond to each other within this activity the same way they would in the face-to-face classroom. And that's what I bring this up because that's what it's about. It's about trying to replicate the face-to-face environment online, and that can be extremely challenging. So moving back to the week.
Hey, Chad, you have a quick question, if
yes.
I can interrupt for a second. Miss Jetta is asking about, she said, are we allowed to use Noodle for our virtuals? Are you asking about Moodle, what Chad's demonstrating, or Noodle as in like another platform? And you can put in or unmute yourself.
I think she's probably referring to this.
Yeah, she is.
I think that the IT department wants to limit student confusion with different places to go. However, Dr. Kirby may grant that. He seems to be fine with using it. I think it depends on what you're trying to do instructionally. If what you're trying to do instructionally is being hindered, then it may be worth dealing a little bit with the making sure students can log in. So it's trading one headache for a lesser headache, I guess. And I'm sure Dr. Kirby would be more than willing if you say, hey, I'm trying to do this instruction because I'm doing intensive reading, I'm trying to do intervention with reading. It is difficult. And I don't think I can effectively do that, even with all the tools that we have in an online environment. That's a challenging thing to do. And I'm also doing it for Union College, it looks like. So, you know,
yeah. She says she really likes it, and I like it too. We use it at Union, and I've used it for years. And mind you, I've used lots of learning management systems, from Blackboard to Canvas to Desire to Learn. There's so many different ones out there, but this one, it seems to be the most user-friendly especially for accommodating students. That's what I like about it. There's so many tools that Chad uses that help students that I really like it.
Miss Markham has a question.
I was just going to say, the Google Classroom is what you have to use as your launching point. You
Okay.
can attach Moodle or anything to the Google Classroom. You have to go to Google Classroom and say, Google Classroom, day one, go to Moodle.
Right. And that's a good point that she brings up. They want Google Classroom to be a launch point, and that's actually what I'm going to do. The Google Classroom you just saw, I'm actually going to delete all that content, and then I'm going to put a portal. It's going to give them directions on how to log into Moodle. If anyone does want to use Moodle, what I do is I create an Excel spreadsheet with all my students I pull it out of Infinite Campus. And then I basically upload my students. They go into their classes. Everything is set up. And then I set their logins as their Jackson email. And then just to make life easy, because I've got the site secured on kind of a different level, I make all their passwords like Jackson20. And then what I do is I block the outside world from being able to get to it. And then this system tracks these students to their homes, to their IPs, to the MAC address. So I don't have to worry about them, messing around in the system. And they know it. They don't even try. I mentioned.
You have another question when you finish.
Yes. All right. The last thing I'll say is one of the things, going back to the balance, you need to be able to balance. What are you going to put your time into? You cannot grade every little thing. You cannot create dynamic, engaging instruction and teach online and face-to-face. It'd be 24 hours a day that you'd be trying to chase your tail and do this. So it's about finding that balance. One of the things that I like that is very important for me is I have exam view CDs for my books. I strive to get them no matter what I teach, and they hold all the questions for a given story, like Raymond's Run, for a novel unit. And I simply put that into my computer. I load it, I export it as a Blackboard 6 file, and then I suck it into Moodle, and I have my question banks. Question banks for novels can be 300 to 500 questions. You can choose lower level, mid-level, advanced level, essay, multiple choice select, true and false, short answer. It blows all those questions in, and I just simply go in, create my quiz in Moodle, choose which questions I want, and deploy it. I deployed the quizzes you saw, that you're looking at right now. It took me 5 minutes to deploy 3 quizzes from scratch in Moodle, because I had the exam view CD for the book, and I was able to quickly just type the questions in the quiz editor for my class expectations. Google Classroom can do the same thing. However, it would have probably taken me 2 to 3 hours to put 25, 30 questions in with multiple choice by hand. And I just don't want to allocate my time to writing test questions. I want to put my time into creating dynamic, engaging content and bridging the gap for those students who struggle. So that's where I'm at with that. What was the question that you want me to?
Chris was asking if Moodle was free.
Okay, yes, Moodle is free, but the hosting is not. We used to have Moodle at Jackson, from what I understand, years ago. I've hosted Moodle since 2003. Brandon High School stopped using it in 2014. And I will continue to host it probably for the rest of my life. So yes, you're lucky in that this installation of Moodle is 100% free. If you wanted your own installation, since COVID, Moodle hosting companies have made it free for teacher accounts at different places that host it. Normally Moodle, if you want to professionally host it through a Moodle partner, like what Union has well, not really, that's a bad example, sorry. Like with Remote Learner, it's about $2,500 per year for an entire school district. So it's not very expensive. The code is open source. The code is free. The code was developed by people like me and people that are educators first, programmers second. So we program Moodle from an instructional standpoint. We don't program Moodle from, the standpoint of being an IT person thinking they know what is best for instruction. We are classroom teachers, we are professors, and then those of us that are developers develop Moodle. And it's an open development community, but there is a core of developers in, I think, Australia and England that do it 100% full time. So yes, Moodle is free, but it's also not free. No good educational system for teaching online is free. Google Classroom, much to many people's beliefs, is not free. If you start putting in all of the things that make Google Classroom really good, you're going to pay a lot of money for those third-party plugins. You're going to pay a lot of money for those different elements that plug into it. So nothing is free. And that's what public education needs to come to terms with, is that if 1/3 of our students or half of our students are being taught online, then we need to have budgetary allocation that supports that. Or then you need to accept the instructional that your teachers are able to give. So what was the other thing you wanted me to come back on?
So I wanted you to show them how to transfer information from Google, but we had a couple more questions. So someone, and I'm sorry, for some reason it's logging you in as numbers. So I'm not sure who I'm talking to in the chat, but 542966 is asking about, I believe, logging into the main Moodle site. And so what Chad was talking about is this is our own Moodle installation on our server, and he's happy, both of us are happy to host it and let you guys use the space and everything, and Chad's a great administrator for it. I can attest to that. Oh, Josh, okay, thank you so much. So sorry, I didn't give you the option to rename yourself. But yes, the main Moodle site, you do have to create your own login for that, but that's just like the main overall Moodle site. This is a particular one, and Chad can help you get you a login for ours and everything like that. So this is our own installation of it on our own server. So if you want to talk a little bit.
Yeah, going back to that, Moodle.org is a place for collaboration amongst educators worldwide. It's a place for plugins, forums, and help. If you can't figure out how to do something, you go there. They have videos on YouTube that'll teach you how to do everything that there is in Moodle. Moodle has a lot of bells and whistles. I mean, I don't use but maybe 25% of what Moodle has to offer. The problem with Moodle is how it's administered. I've been an instructional designer and teacher for almost 20 years now, and I've specialized in development with Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, every LMS under the sun almost. And how you put it together, how you administer it will determine how well people use it and like it. Usability has to be number one. And if you administer it properly, it's a great system. If you administer it not well, people are going to hate it. So that's the love-hate relationship with Moodle and Blackboard and Angel, Desire to Learn, all of them. It's all in how it's put together and administered. And it's true even to some point with Google Classroom. If it's administered well and set up well, it's going to work better. And that's kind of the crux of it. I'm kind of anal about making sure that things run properly. What you're looking at now on the screen is how we ended last year with regards to COVID. I wanted to give you an idea out of the 50 some days of instruction that we had. I want to show you what's going to happen in your Google Classrooms or in Moodle.
Hey,
Public
Chad?
education is heavy. Yes.
Just real quick, you have extra time. The next thing is just a pre-recorded video that they can watch anytime. If they are interested in seeing more about Moodle and Google Classroom, you guys have until 11:30 that they can watch that video anytime. I kind of planned it this way because I had a feeling some people might have some questions about Moodle or Google Classroom. So you guys have plenty of time.
So going back to how we ended last year, our NTI days, we started with, I actually deleted everything I had done up to, I think March of last year when we left, but this is last year. So just from March on, this is what the content looked like. So here we have NTI day 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. You can see how much content, and this was keeping it pretty light. We weren't doing half as much as we would have been doing in the face-to-face classroom, but you can see how much content is going to build in your Google Classrooms, Moodle, Blackboard. So again, organization is going to be absolutely key for this. Going back to Google Classroom and answering that question that came up earlier. In Moodle, if you taught a class last year, you can, port the whole class over, port 20, 30 things that you want from the other class. Google Classroom is in its infancy, so you can port those in. The way I have to kind of jump out of the regular class here and go back to my regular class. You can import them. I just have to get to my actual Google Classroom screen. So I created a sandbox course just to test this out because I had the same question. I'm like, well, I want to be able to import things. So I created a sandbox. And when you go here, we figured out that, sometimes it's tough screen recording. I believe under your classwork, you can create, and then you can do reuse post. And it's going to bring up the other classes. This is reading grade 8. So this is a class I just showed you. So I can grab any one of these one at a time and port them over into the new course. So let's say if I wanted the Raymond's Run PDF, I can reuse that and it's going to jump it right into my new Google Classroom, and there it is. And then I can edit it and assign it as I need. So unfortunately, you have to do each one separately. The other problem is, I know that's I'm sure many people are asking, is what about teaching 6 hours? So this is where things get kind of advanced. In Google Classroom, you're going to need to create a class for each one of your hours. You might have first hour be your online hour, and you're going to have to create a class for each hour after that. That means the only way to put the content in is you're going to have to repeat yourself 5-6 times. I'm going to continue to try to see if there's a way to get around that, to hack it, or do a workaround, some way of getting around that. But in order to be able to not have to do that, you need to be able to set students up in cohorts and groups. We dealt with this 10 years ago in Moodle, same problem. I don't want to have to upload the same thing and build the same class 6 times over. And if you update one class, you have to update 5 others, and it gets tedious and time consuming. If you do choose to use a Moodle installation, ours or Remote Learner or some other one that's offering it free, one advantage to Moodle, and again, this is an advanced feature. You need to kind of know what you're doing. I don't do that. My class is set up. This is the one from last year. It's set up in such a way that I created cohorts and groups. So when I add one artifact or test or quiz or whatever, it goes to all students. Instead of dividing the class up into 6 hours, I divide the students into 6 hours of groups. So if I look at my Tangerine novel test right here, I can go to my attempts. Oh wait, actually I think I have to go to Gradebook. Yes, I have to go to Gradebook in order to show you guys this. So sorry about that, my mistake. I just simply will be able to choose the hour where I want to see their grades. So if I go over to grades right here, I have a little bit of a slow internet connection too. Once I'm in my grading area, I can see all my participants for a given activity, or I can choose a period. So let's say that I want to look at period 1 from last year. It's going to cycle through and find just first period students, and there they are. And then there's their grades. So then I would take and manually just type those over into Infinite Campus. But it saved me from having to upload content, 4, 5, 6 times over. And it's about balance and finding what's important to you. Where do you want to put your time? Is it grading? Is it content development? Is it redundancy? Is it setting up the online? It's a personal choice. So I think I'm going to go back to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and check my notes to make sure I covered everything that I was going to cover and see if there are any questions that I missed. Okay. All right. It doesn't look like it. Go back a page here. Hillary, are you still on here?
Yes.
I don't think there were any more questions, or did you have anything to add on?
If anybody wants any more information about this, both Chad and I are happy to help you with any of that. We tried to kind of give an overview of both systems and the possibilities. And after, so lunch is from 11:30 to 12:30. After that, we're going to be talking about the first 20 days, which is an add-on to what Chad's saying with the gradual release of responsibility, building routines, and getting some of those lessons actually started. That's a time when you can actually play with your Google Classroom. I'm not sure, Chad, if you would be willing to set up some Moodle sample courses for them to play with maybe at that time. But again, we wanted to make it something as meaningful for you, and that seemed to kind of bubble to the surface that you wanted to know more about kind of the online stuff. So let us know. Feel free to unmute yourself or ask Chad for permission to unmute or put it in the chat if there's anything you have questions about or want to know more about, or ask him in the classroom, if you're right there. So just let us know.
And, just to add on to one last thing I had mentioned, I'm going to be working on seeing if I can figure out a way to get those e-learning modules or computer-based training modules integrated with, they're easy in Moodle. They're called SCORM. You just plug them in and they're good to go. But Xerte has kind of a back end part where I'll save you the tech jargon. I'm going to basically try to make it so that can be married to Google Classroom. I'll run it on my servers and have access to it. which will solve some of the issues for our teachers if you want to use it. But if you're interested in that, or if you know what I'm talking about when I say computer-based training, or if you want to take a story like Raymond's Run and make it interactive and stop and ask questions and have students, you know, force them to loop to understand, adaptive learning mode is this called. I think I can do that. It's just going to take a little bit of development on my end. And I want to see if I can do it to enhance the, you know, aspects of Google Classroom that aren't there yet and may not be there for years to come. So I'll be tinkering with that in my spare time between now and school starts. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, type in the chat. I think we're about ready to wrap up if there aren't any questions. You're all welcome to use my system. I can also look up and post other systems that are free for single teacher classrooms. They won't host the whole school probably for free, but they'll do individual teachers. Don't make the mistake of going to Moodle.org. They don't do any hosting. It's outside companies that do the hosting for it, like Remote Learner, Classroom Revolution, Moodle Rooms. These are some of the big ones that host. So, and you know, and I'm sure that Rhonda and Josh and whoever, if there's enough people that want to use it, Josh is more than capable of deploying a LAMP stack server and installing Moodle for us to use on site, which might become a necessity, because that would really lighten up the bandwidth as having an in-house version, because then you're not using the internet bandwidth connection, you're using your network connection for any students face-to-face. Online students would still be bandwidth, but it would cut it down a little bit. And if there's no questions, I don't see any questions. Anyone?
Yeah, go ahead and feel free to take a break if you need to. Talk to each other, talk to Chad. We can stay on here for a few minutes if you have questions. There's a short video by Dr. Marley. She's our communications professor, one of them at Union, and she does a great job of putting together a quick video talking about online feedback. So how do you give productive online feedback? How do you communicate appropriately and you know, to the best of your ability online with your students? She has a lot of really cool tricks and tips for you. So that one you can watch at any time. Feel free to hop off, take a break, or watch that one, or stay on with Chad and myself. We're happy to answer questions. We're also recording this session and most of the sessions. So you'll be able to go back to the Moodle page if you missed something or you want to review something. Maybe Chad went through something and you're like, I just want to go back and look at that. I'll be able to put the recording on ULearn for you guys. So if you have any questions, hang out, let us know. Otherwise, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, just email me if you do want to use Open Moodle. Just to add on, you can also potentially use Google Groups for discussions in Google Classroom. I tried to set that up, but what it required me to do is to, for each discussion, I'd have to enroll. I have to basically type in every single kid's email and add them to the group. And I was going to research the developers thing more to find out if I could upload a file or something, but that might be another way to do discussions. I forgot to mention that. So that's all I have. Feel free to ask questions. Like I said, Ms. Parmentier said we'll hang out for a minute. If anyone has questions, and just type in the chat or unmute.
So I think I'll have you hop on after lunch with me when Samantha and I talk about